first-time Sergeant Rowan Vale held the royal child. He was standing in a corridor full of smoke, with a pulse rifle in one hand. The princess's daughter tucked against the armor of his chest in the other, and the burning nursery collapsing behind him. The palace of Alira had been built for ceremony. Not survival, all moonstone arches and silk banners. But beauty becomes kindling fast when assassins come through the walls. Rowan had been there only because Queen Maressa trusted peace the way soldiers trust thin ice. Carefully, so she had hired a human advisor. A scarred outsider from a species the court mocked. Humans were too blunt, too loud, too impossible to govern. Princess Alira had once laughed that the human looked less like a man and more like a wall in uniform. Rowan had answered, walls are useful. They stop bad things getting in. Nobody laughed when the Eastern Wing exploded, or when musicians drew silent blades and started killing their way toward the bloodline, because in less than a minute, the whole palace understood the truth. It had not invited a human inside for prestige. It had invited one for everything going wrong when Rowan reached the nursery. 3 guards were already dead across the threshold. The nanny was trying to drag a crib against the door, and little Princess Selly, heir to Alira, sat in the center of the room in a silver nightwrap. Clutching a stuffed moonbird and staring at the smoke with furious dignity, Rowan dropped to one knee and said, "Princess, I need you to be brave." She studied his face and asked, "Are they here for Mama?" Rohan gave her the truth. "They will try, but not if we move first." The inner door split a heartbeat later, and the first assassin came through firing. Rowan shot him once, turned, shot the second through the hinge gap, scooped Seely up under one arm, and kicked over the crib for cover. He fought in the ugly. Practical-style humans perfect on harsh worlds, curtains burned to blind scopes. Perfume atomizers shattered to confuse trackers, furniture became barricades, and when he reached the servant shaft, he shoved the nanny down first, then lowered the child, then dropped after her while plasma chewed the walls above them. Selly never screamed, not once, even when explosions shook dust into her hair. She only whispered questions into his collar. "Where are we going? Why do they hate us? Are humans always this angry?" Rowan almost laughed at that, but there was no time, because the attackers sealed corridors and began broadcasting fake orders in the Queen's own voice. Surrender the heir, preserve the throne. Rowan had seen coups before, so he took the child deeper into the bones of the palace, into a maintenance armory he had secretly installed while ministers rolled their jeweled eyes at his paranoia. Selly stared as hidden racks unfolded with rifles, grenades, and armor plates. "You hid all this in our house," she said. Rowan strapped a light vest over her silk wrap and answered, "I hid it for your house." Then the ceiling came down, and the next wave arrived, screaming through the dust. Rowan met them at the breach, like war had been waiting under his skin all along. The first died before his boots touched the floor. The second lost a visor. The third got close enough to regret it, while Seely crouched exactly where he had told her, hands over her ears, small, stiff, brave. The human turned a maintenance tunnel into a graveyard using every lesson his species ever paid for in blood. Conserve ammo, punish hesitation, move before fear becomes thought. When his rifle ran dry, he used trap charges. When boarders cut through the far hatch, he killed the deck lights and fought by sound. When more of them flooded the corridor, he vented the adjacent shaft and let vacuum drag half the raiding team into darkness. Then he picked up the child and kept moving, because surviving the first wave means nothing if you stop. Deep below the palace, in the ancient root vaults, he found Queen Maressa, alive, wounded, and ringed by her last loyal guards. He also found Chancellor Vare. Smiling with blood on his sleeves, the man had sold the capital to off-world raiders in exchange for power. Kingdoms become negotiable once heirs vanish. Vare raised a pistol toward Selly. Rowan threw himself sideways, took the shot through his own shoulder, and still hit the traitor hard enough to crack him against the stone bins. The loyal guards finished the rest, and Queen Maressa pulled her child into shaking arms while the vault thundered with bombardment above them. For one breath it looked like salvation, then the floor trembled again. because the Raider flagship was descending for the final strike. The generals wanted evacuation, the ministers wanted surrender. The guards wanted orders, Rowan wanted a firing solution. Bleeding through a pressure bandage, he limped to the vault's seismic control core. A relic from the age when the palace foundations had to shift during moonquakes, and began rewiring it into something no Illyran engineer had been reckless enough to imagine. Queen Maressa watched the human work and finally understood why every empire smiled at humanity, while quietly building contingencies against it. Because humans do not merely survive impossible conditions, they weaponize them. Rowan linked the seismic stabilizers to the palace shield pylons, overcharged the bedrock anchors, and turned the royal complex into a lance aimed straight at the sky. When the flagship dipped lower to fire, the ground struck first. A pillar of white force erupted from beneath the palace and punched through the enemy hull, tearing the warship open across the dawn like wet paper. Burning debris rained over the capital. The remaining raiders broke and fled, and silence hit the city in one stunned wave. Later, when traitors had been dragged in chains through the square and the dead were honored, Queen Maressa stood before the court with little Selly beside her and Rowan Vale in a sling at her right. Every noble expected land or titles. Instead, the queen bowed her crowned head to the human who had carried her future through fire and said, "You protected my child. Now I owe you everything." Rowan looked down at Selly as she grinned up at him. Then he looked back at the queen and answered, "Then start by making sure she grows up in a world where a child never needs a human to save a throne again."